You know, life has a strange way of revealing truths you never asked to know. Sometimes it waits until you've built your whole world, brick by brick, dream by dream, before pulling one thread and watching it all unravel. My name is Evelyn Hartman. I'm 63 years old, and if you asked anyone who knew me a few years ago, they'd tell you I had it all. A devoted husband, a lovely home, 2 grown children, and peace. Or so I thought. But peace has a sound, doesn't it? A hum you don't notice until it's gone. Mine disappeared one night with a simple lie. One that began with, "I'll be home late." That lie led me down a road darker than I could have ever imagined, filled with secrets buried so deep, even I didn't recognize the woman I'd become while uncovering them. I'm not here to play the victim. I'm here to tell you how truth, raw, ugly, liberating truth, can destroy you and yet somehow set you free. So, if you think you're ready, sit with me a while. Because once you hear my story, you might start questioning your own. Chapter 1. The Call That Shouldn't Have Happened. I never thought the sound of my husband's voice could make my blood run cold. Not after 40 years of marriage. Not after raising 2 children, celebrating 3 grandchildren, and surviving life's ordinary storms together. But that night, a quiet Thursday in early autumn, the voice that spoke from my phone wasn't the same one I had known half my life. It was too close, too calm, and too impossible. Richard was supposed to be on a plane to London. His flight had taken off at 9:40 p.m. I'd checked the airline tracker, even watched the little aircraft icon crawl across the digital Atlantic on my tablet, proof that my husband was somewhere between here and England. And yet, at 10:17 p.m., my phone rang. His name flashed across the screen. Richard Hartman. Evelyn. His voice was steady, familiar, filled with that quiet authority that once made me fall for him. "I just wanted to hear your voice before I take off." I remember staring at the clock. 10:17. The plane had already been in the air for half an hour. "You haven't taken off yet?" I asked, my voice light, almost teasing, though something sharp began to stir in my stomach. There was a pause. A short inhale, and then a faint sound behind him. Laughter. A woman's laughter. Soft, breathless, close enough to the phone that I could almost feel the air move between them. I, flight's been delayed again," he said quickly. "Just boarding now. I'll call when I land." Then the line went dead. That was the moment my chest tightened. Not from panic, but clarity. The kind of clarity that hurts. For a few seconds, I sat in silence, phone still pressed to my ear, staring at the soft reflection of my own face in the dark window. Behind me, the house looked like a museum of our shared life. Photos of family vacations, wedding portraits, awards he earned. Things that used to mean something. I set the phone down and exhaled slowly. Then I opened the family GPS app. We'd installed it a year ago after Richard's minor car accident. "Just in case something happens again," I'd told him. "I'd feel better knowing where you are." He smiled that charming, slightly patronizing smile. "Always worrying, Evie. You'll drive yourself mad." maybe he was right. Because when I opened that app, the blue dot that represented Richard's phone wasn't moving across the Atlantic. It was blinking steadily, 10 miles away, on Waverly Hill. A quiet neighborhood with elm trees, picket fences, and tidy lawns. The kind of place where people smile too easily and lock their doors at night. I told myself it was a glitch. Maybe the phone was in his luggage. Maybe he turned it off before takeoff. Maybe. But then the blue dot moved. Slowly. Up one street, then turned a corner, then stopped. In front of an address I didn't recognize. 117 Waverly Hill Road. The house had a name. The Stanton Residence. And just like that, the pieces started clicking together in my head. His business trips, his late meetings, the nights he came home smelling faintly of lavender that wasn't my perfume. The hotel bills I'd found once, explained away as client hospitality. I grabbed my keys. The night air was cool when I stepped outside, the kind that seeps into your chest and makes your breath visible. My hands trembled as I started the car. The dashboard clock read 10:49. Every turn, every stoplight felt like walking deeper into a memory I didn't want to relive. 40 years of loyalty, of laughter, of quiet breakfasts and shared secrets. All now in question. By the time I reached Waverly Hill, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the hum of the engine. The street was silent, lined with Victorian homes that looked painted from a postcard. And there it was, a slate blue house with white shutters, hydrangeas blooming on the porch, and a wooden swing swaying gently in the night breeze. Parked in the driveway was Richard's car, his black BMW. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. Then a light flicked on upstairs. Through the thin curtains, shadows moved. A woman's silhouette, long hair tied loosely, and a child's laughter echoing faintly through the open window. I froze. That sound, the laughter, it cut deeper than betrayal, because it was innocent, because it didn't belong in my husband's world, because it meant he had built a life that wasn't mine. I sat there in the dark for what felt like hours. My mind replayed every late night at the office, every missed call, every polite smile he gave me when I asked if something was wrong. At 11:22, my phone buzzed. A text from Richard. "Boarding now, love. Flight's finally leaving. Don't wait up." I stared at the blue-lit screen, then looked back at the glowing house. The timing was too perfect, the lie too precise. When I finally drove away, I didn't cry. Not yet. Tears come when you've accepted something. I hadn't accepted anything. I was still gathering evidence. By the time I reached home, the sky had shifted from black to charcoal. The house felt foreign. Every photo, every piece of furniture, all staged props in a life that wasn't real anymore. I poured myself a drink. Then another. The clock struck midnight. I opened his office drawer. Neat as always. Files, pens, a folded napkin from a restaurant I didn't recognize. Beneath the folders, something caught my eye. A leather-bound notebook. Inside, flight itineraries, meeting notes, a few sketches. And then, a receipt. from a children's toy store, a baseball glove, a model train set, dated 2 months ago. And the buyer's name? Michael Stanton. That was the moment I stopped trembling, because I knew with every part of me that my husband didn't just have another woman, he had another life. I didn't sleep that night. The house was silent, but my thoughts weren't. They moved through the rooms like ghosts, touching everything Richard and I had built, whispering questions I didn't want answers to. I remember tracing my fingers over the photo from our 25th anniversary, me in a sapphire dress, him smiling as though love were something you could rehearse. By dawn, my mind had made a decision my heart wasn't ready for. I needed to go back to that house, the one on Waverly Hill, the one with the swing that moved in the wind like it remembered someone's laughter. The neighborhood looked different in daylight, cheerful, harmless, deceitfully peaceful. Children on bicycles, gardeners trimming hedges, the kind of place where people wave without knowing your name. I parked 3 houses down again. My heart didn't pound this time. It waited. The blue house looked exactly as it had the night before. Same porch, same perfect hydrangeas. But now there was more to see. A white SUV in the driveway. A woman stepping out. Her hair tied up in a messy bun. She was beautiful in that effortless way women are when they don't try too hard. Jeans, white blouse, no makeup. Claire Stanton. The name on the mailbox confirmed it. She opened the passenger door and helped a boy out. 10 years old, maybe? Brown hair, soft curls, same way of cocking his head when something caught his curiosity. Ethan. He looked like Richard. Too much like him. And that's when my breath caught. The kind of quiet gasp you make when you're stabbed by truth. Because DNA doesn't lie, even if people do. Claire smiled as Ethan ran up the path, his small backpack bouncing. For a moment, it was a picture of ordinary happiness, a mother and son on a Thursday morning. Then the front door opened and the world tilted. Because he was there. Richard, my husband, wearing the same navy coat he'd supposedly packed for London. He kissed Claire on the cheek, soft, familiar, routine. Then he bent to whisper something to Ethan, who laughed and hugged him. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look afraid. He looked home. I gripped the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles turned white. That was the moment I realized I wasn't watching an affair. I was watching a family. I followed them, though I didn't mean to. Or maybe I did. When betrayal lives under your skin, reason becomes irrelevant. After they left, Richard in his car, Claire and Ethan walking toward a nearby school, I stepped out of my vehicle, sunglasses on, hood pulled low. The air smelled of cut grass and wet earth. I walked past the house slowly. The curtains were open just enough to reveal a living room, cozy, elegant, with a blue-gray couch and framed photographs. One photo caught my eye. Richard, Claire, and Ethan on a beach. My husband, barefoot in the sand, his arm around her waist. I froze. He had told me that week he'd been in Seattle for a corporate summit. I even remember sending him a care package. Homemade cookies, a scarf, a note that said, "Come home safe." He never came home to me. The pain was sharp, but I swallowed it. Pain could wait. Evidence couldn't. I pulled out my phone and took a photo through the window, then another of the license plate. I wasn't sure what I'd do with them yet, but I knew I'd need proof, the kind you can't talk yourself out of later. Back in my car, I called Andrew, my son, the lawyer, the one who inherited Richard's decisiveness, but not his deceit. He answered on the second ring. "Mom, are you okay? You sound—" "I need you to find someone for me," I interrupted. "A Michael Stanton. Lives on Waverly Hill. See what you can get. Property records, occupation, anything." He hesitated. "What's this about?" "Just humor me," I said. "Please." He knew that tone, the one I used when I'd already made my mind. "I'll call you in a few hours." When I hung up, my hands were trembling again, but it wasn't fear this time. It was anger, cold, steady, useful. By evening, Andrew called back. His voice was tight. "Mom, are you sitting down?" "I am." "Michael Stanton owns that house. Bought it 8 years ago. Listed as self-employed, consulting business. No spouse listed, but there's a joint account with someone named Claire Stanton, and—" He paused. "And what?" "And he looks exactly like Dad." I didn't speak, didn't breathe. I just stared at the glass of untouched wine in front of me and listened to the silence that followed my son's words. Andrew cleared his throat. "Mom, what's going on?" "Your father," I said slowly, "has another life, another name, another family." There was a long pause. Then, "I'll be there tomorrow." That night, I walked through the house touching everything. The piano keys, the back of his chair, the shirts still hanging nicely in the closet. It felt like trespassing in my own home. Do you know that feeling? When the person you love becomes a stranger in slow motion. First a stranger to your trust, then to your memories, until even the smell of their clothes feels foreign. At 2 a.m., I found the courage to open his locked drawer. Inside were his passport, checkbook, and a small velvet box. Inside the box wasn't jewelry, but a key. Silver, engraved with the number 117. The same number as the Waverly Hill address. My breath hitched. My fingers shook as I placed it back exactly where it had been. Morning came, and with it, a strange calm. I showered, dressed, and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked ordinary. Isn't that the cruelest thing? To look normal when your world's burning down. Richard came home that evening, suitcase in hand, wearing that familiar travel smile. "Flight got delayed again," he said. "You wouldn't believe the chaos at Heathrow." "Oh, I can imagine," I replied. He kissed my cheek. "Missed you." The scent of lavender lingered on his jacket, the same scent that lived in her house. I smiled. "You must be exhausted." "Dead tired. Just want a shower and an early night." I watched him walk upstairs, the man that I had loved since I was 23, the man who still hummed when he shaved, the man who was 2 men. When the shower started running, I took his phone. No password change, same 4 digits he'd used for years. Within seconds, I found the messages. "Claire, Ethan's got a cold. Can you pick up soup on your way home, love?" Michael, Of course. Tell him Daddy's on his way. My vision blurred. I scrolled further. Photos of Ethan's birthday. Dinner selfies. A Christmas tree that wasn't ours. I set the phone down carefully, the way one sets down a loaded weapon. Then I whispered to the empty room, I know who you are now. And somewhere deep inside, a part of me, the quiet, obedient wife, finally began to die. The next morning, I called a private investigator. I need to find out everything about a man named Michael Stanton. He looks exactly like my husband. On the other end, the man's voice was calm. You think he's leading a double life? I don't think, I said. I know. Chapter 3. The Mirror Cracks. If you've ever stood in front of a mirror long enough, you start to notice small distortions, the faint warping at the edges, the way your reflection doesn't blink exactly when you do. That's how life felt after I found out about Richard's second family. I was still there, still breathing, still going through the motions, but everything had a delay, a distance, a fracture. There's a particular kind of quiet that follows betrayal. Not the loud heartbreak you see in films, but something slower, heavier. It sits in your chest and hums. Detective Paul Sterling arrived the following afternoon. Tall, polite, with a tired sort of wisdom in his eyes. You said you believe your husband's living under another name. I nodded, sliding the printed photos across the table. That's him. That's Richard Hartman. He examined the images, leaning forward. You're certain? I said, down to the way he folds his shirt cuffs. He even hums the same tune when he thinks no one's listening. He's been living two lives, mine and hers. He didn't flinch. How long do you think this has been going on? I said, 8 years. Maybe longer. Long enough for him to forget which woman's name he sang in his sleep. He exhaled. I'll run background on Michael Stanton. Assets, licenses, tax records. You'll want to sit down when we go through it. I said, I'm already sitting down. The days stretched long after that. Richard went on with his usual routines. Morning jogs, business calls, dinner at 7. I played my part. The patient wife, the loyal listener. It's funny how convincing love can sound when it's really reconnaissance. Every night when he slept, I took notes. Times, numbers, patterns. I even learned the rhythm of his lies. Short ones came easily. Long ones came rehearsed. It was almost poetic, the precision of deceit. Then, one afternoon, Sterling called. His tone was different, heavier, measured. Mrs. Hartman, I found something you need to see. We met in a small cafe near downtown. He placed a manila folder between us. I hesitated before opening it. Inside were printed documents, bank transfers, property deeds, a driver's license with Richard's face, but a different name, Michael Stanton. But that wasn't the worst part. He handed me a thin piece of paper, a certificate. My breath caught as I read the words. Death certificate. Name, Evelyn Grace Hartman. Date of death, April 18th, 2017. Cause, motor vehicle accident. For a moment, I didn't understand. My name looked foreign on that page, like it belonged to someone else. Then it hit me. He declared me dead. Sterling nodded grimly. Legally, yes. Filed in a different county using falsified documents. He claimed his wife had passed away in a car crash. No surviving relatives. It was processed and closed 2 months later. But he finished, alive. Which makes this fraud, identity manipulation, and possibly insurance crime. I stared at the document, my reflection trembling in the coffee surface. He erased me. Not metaphorically. Literally. Sterling leaned forward, voice steady. He built a clean slate, Mrs. Hartman. Michael Stanton could remarry, buy property, open accounts, all without Evelyn Hartman ever existing again. The room felt smaller. The sound of clinking cups turned distant. I pressed my hand to my chest, half expecting my heartbeat to falter. I trusted him with everything. My life, my name, my future. And he used it as a cover story. That was the moment anger stopped being emotion and became purpose. That night, Richard came home humming, as usual, briefcase in hand. I poured him a drink, neat bourbon, 2 ice cubes, just like he liked it. Long day? I asked. The usual. You know how the London team gets without me around. I smiled faintly. You always did make yourself indispensable. He grinned, kissing my forehead. Occupational hazard. He didn't notice the faint tremor in my hands, the way my jaw tightened when he turned away. Inside, 1,000 words screamed. Outside, I was silence itself. The following morning, I met Rachel, my daughter, at a quiet park cafe. She'd flown in overnight after Andrew told her everything. Her eyes were red from crying. "Mom," she said softly, taking my hand, "what are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But whatever I do, I won't do it in anger. He's built a world out of lies, Rachel. If I lose control, I become one of them." She nodded slowly. "We'll help. Andrew's already digging into his companies. If he used your identity for anything financial, I know. I'll be ready." We sat in silence for a while. The wind carried the scent of coffee and rain. Somewhere nearby, a mother laughed as her toddler fed birds. Ordinary life continued, indifferent to my unraveling. That evening, Richard told me he had another conference coming up. Chicago this time. 3 days. Same pattern. I nodded and smiled, the picture of a trusting wife. I said, "Be safe." He left early the next morning, suitcase in hand. As soon as his car disappeared, I called Sterling. I said, "Follow him. I need to know where he's really going." By noon, Sterling called back. He didn't go to the airport. He's at a storage facility downtown, Unit 47B, under the name Stanton. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. What's in it? That's what I'm about to find out. Hours later, he called again, his voice low, almost disbelieving. "Mrs. Hartman, you should come down here." The storage unit was dimly lit, dust floating in beams of light. Boxes stacked high, a small desk, and a corkboard filled with photographs, not of Claire or Ethan, but of me. Dozens of them. Some from years ago, some recent. At the grocery store, in the garden, even one from the art exhibit I had attended last month. Sterling said quietly, "He's been following you, keeping tabs. These were taken without your knowledge." My hands shook as I lifted one photo. Me sitting at the park, reading. Beneath it, a note in Richard's handwriting. "She still likes mornings alone." Why? Why would he watch me after declaring me dead? Sterling's expression darkened. "Insurance policy. He needed proof you were gone, but maybe he couldn't risk you being discovered alive. People like him don't leave loose ends." The implication hit me like a blade. "You think he meant to—" Sterling's eyes met mine. "I think he meant to make it true." When I got home, I didn't cry. I went to Richard's office, turned on the lamp, and stared at his framed certificates, his tidy rows of pens. Everything perfectly ordered, just like his lies. I picked up our wedding photo. My 23-year-old self smiled back at me. I almost pitied her. Then I turned the frame over and taped the death certificate to the back. Chapter 4. The Anniversary Trap. When you live with a liar long enough, you start memorizing their stage cues, the small gestures before they perform, the half smile, the deliberate sigh, the pause before a fabricated story. Richard had been rehearsing his lines for years, but what he never understood was that I'd been studying the script just as long. So, when our 40th wedding anniversary approached, I knew exactly what to do. He thought I'd forgotten about the date. I let him believe that. Then, one morning over coffee, I looked up and said, "Maybe we should have a small dinner, just family. We've earned it, don't you think?" He smiled. That same politician's smile that had fooled colleagues, friends, and me. "That sounds perfect, Evie." He still called me that, as though the word hadn't curdled somewhere between his throat and my name. Inside, my pulse steadied. I wasn't planning a celebration. I was planning a reckoning. Andrew and Rachel helped quietly. We booked a private hall at the Marquette, one of the city's most elegant hotels. It had chandeliers like melting gold and a mirrored ceiling that reflected everything, which somehow felt appropriate. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" Rachel whispered the night before. "It's dangerous. If he feels cornered—" I met her eyes. "Then he'll feel what I did." Andrew placed a folder on the table, financial statements, offshore transfers, property deeds. "Everything we found is in here. Once you reveal it, there's no going back." "There's no back to go to," I said. The evening of the dinner shimmered with false elegance. Richard arrived in his favorite charcoal suit, that self-assured stride that made people think he owned every room he entered. I greeted him at the entrance, wearing the sapphire dress from our 25th anniversary, the same one in the photo I'd stared at months earlier. "You look beautiful," he said. "And you," I replied, "look exactly the same." Guests filtered in, old friends, business partners, even Margaret, his sister, who had flown in from Boston. The room buzzed with polite laughter and champagne glasses clinking. Richard, ever the showman, gave a short toast. 40 years with this extraordinary woman," he said, gesturing to me. "I'm the luckiest man alive." Lucky. alive. The irony almost made me laugh. When dessert arrived, I stood. My hands didn't shake. The microphone felt strangely light. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," I began, voice steady. 40 years is a long time. You learn so much about the person you marry, their habits, their dreams, their secrets. A murmur passed through the crowd. Richard chuckled awkwardly. "Always the poet, Evie." "Yes," I said, "but tonight I'd rather be factual." I reached into my clutch and pulled out a small remote. The lights dimmed. A screen behind us flickered to life. Slide 1. A smiling photograph of Michael Stanton. A man, identical to my husband. Slide 2. The deed to 117 Waverly Hill Road. Slide 3. A family photo. Richard, Claire, and Ethan. The room gasped collectively. Andrew and Rachel stood near the back, silent, watching him turn to stone. I continued, "Meet Michael Stanton, a devoted husband, a loving father, and apparently my husband's other identity." Someone whispered Richard's name. Cameras flashed. He rose, stammering, "Evelyn, this isn't... "Oh, it is," I interrupted. 8 years of it. 2 mortgages, 2 families, 1 man. Slide 4 appeared. My death certificate. I held up the printed sheet. This is how he made it possible. By killing me on paper. The silence was so complete, I could hear the hum of the projector. "He declared me dead," I said quietly, "so he could live without me." Margaret covered her mouth. Someone at the table dropped a fork. Richard's face drained of color. "You don't understand." "No," I said, "I finally do." From the corner of the room, Detective Sterling stepped forward, flanked by 2 plainclothes officers. I hadn't invited them for theater. I'd invited them for truth. Sterling nodded once. "Richard Hartman, also known as Michael Stanton, you're under investigation for fraud, identity falsification, and insurance embezzlement." He turned toward me, eyes wild. "You did this?" "Yes," I said. "You built the lie. I just turned on the lights." As the officers guided him aside, he leaned close enough that I could feel his breath. "You think you've won, Evie," he hissed. "You were never supposed to make it this far." His words froze the air between us. "Was that a threat?" Sterling asked sharply. He only smirked, letting himself be led away. The room emptied quickly after that. Shock has a way of silencing even the curious. My children stayed close. Rachel wrapped her arm around me. Andrew sent a message. "He'll be arraigned next week." I turned off the lamp and whispered into the quiet, "I know." The street outside shimmered in the rain, like the world had just been washed clean. I smiled faintly. I wasn't waiting for closure anymore. I was waiting for morning. There's something sacred about silence after a storm. Not the kind of silence that feels empty, but the kind that feels earned, like the world takes a breath before beginning again. That's what my house sounded like after Richard's arrest. Quiet, honest, real. For the first time in decades, the silence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like peace. The trial moved fast. Evidence stacked itself neatly, like all of his lies finally decided to tell the truth together. Fraud, bigamy, identity theft, insurance manipulation. The papers called it the double life case. He pled guilty to avoid a longer sentence. 6 years. That was all. 6 years for 40 years of deceit. You'd think I'd feel cheated, but I didn't. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just exhales. When the judge asked if I wished to make a statement, I stood. My voice didn't shake. I trusted a man who erased me, But I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to confirm that I exist. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. The truth was enough. After the sentencing, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove to the ocean. The sea was gray, restless, endless. I stood barefoot in the sand and thought about all the versions of myself that had lived and died beside that man. The young girl who believed love could fix anything. The mother who sacrificed her dreams to build someone else's. The woman who refused to see what was right in front of her. And then there was me, the survivor, the rebuilder. I whispered into the wind, "You didn't kill me, Richard. You just burned away everything that wasn't real." The waves carried it away, without echo. Sometimes healing doesn't need to be heard, only released. I began painting again. At first, it was clumsy, too much red, too much shadow. But as weeks passed, the strokes softened. My grief found color, my rage found form. Thomas Green, the curator who had always believed in my work, stopped by one afternoon. He wandered the studio quietly before turning to me. "These aren't paintings, Evelyn. They're survival notes." He asked if I'd consider an exhibition. I laughed. Who'd want to stare at my pain? He said, "Not pain," he said gently. "Truth. And truth is art." I agreed. We called the collection "The Woman Who Vanished Twice." Each canvas told a chapter. Beginnings, betrayals, rebirth. At the opening night, I stood before a crowd of strangers who saw my life not as scandal, but as resilience made visible. Rachel squeezed my hand. Andrew stood near the entrance, quietly proud. I felt like I had finally re-entered the world, not as someone's wife, but as myself. Months later, a letter arrived. No return address. I recognized the handwriting instantly. My mother's. She'd passed 15 years earlier. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. "My dearest Evelyn, if you're reading this, then life has taught you something it once taught me, that love can be both your shelter and your storm. I always suspected Richard's heart had secrets. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to find your strength, not inherit mine. There's a safety deposit key enclosed. You'll find something that was always meant for you. Remember this, my love. Freedom isn't given, it's taken. And you, my daughter, were born to take it. With all my heart, Mother." Tears slid silently down my cheeks. I hadn't cried for Richard's betrayal, but I cried then for her faith in me, for the years I'd spent silencing my own voice. Inside the envelope was a small brass key. The deposit box contained documents, bonds, savings, letters, everything she'd quietly saved and hidden away. Enough money to start over anywhere. And one last envelope, labeled "For the life you still deserve." Inside, a one-way ticket to Paris. Paris. The city I had once dreamed of visiting before marriage, before motherhood, before everything that came after. It felt like a conversation from beyond time, my mother reminding me that the future was still waiting. 3 months later, I landed in Paris. I rented a small apartment on Rue Saint-Antoine, a place with peeling paint, creaky floors, and a balcony overlooking a bakery that smelled like heaven every morning. I painted during the day, walked by the Seine in the evenings, and sometimes sat by the river just listening to people's laughter float across water. One afternoon, Thomas visited. He'd come for an art show and found me sketching near Pont Neuf. "I see you finally took your mother's advice," he said with a grin. "I think she'd be proud," I replied. We walked in silence for a while. Then he asked, "Do you ever miss him?" I thought about it. The answer came like a sigh. "No, but I miss the woman I thought I was when I loved him." He nodded. "That woman built this one." Months turned into weeks. My work flourished. My exhibition in Paris drew attention from galleries across Europe. They said my art had the serenity of a survivor, but it wasn't about survival anymore. It was about living. I began teaching small art classes on weekends, mostly women. Some carried bruises you couldn't see. We didn't talk about our pasts. We just painted. In color, we found language again. Sometimes I'd tell them, "Art doesn't fix you. It just shows you that you're still here." They would nod, and the room would fall into that sacred silence I loved, the kind that meant healing had begun. One evening, I stood on my balcony as the sun dipped behind the Paris rooftops. The air smelled of rain and fresh bread. Below, a street musician played a violin. The same song Richard used to hum absent-mindedly when he thought I wasn't listening. For a moment, I closed my eyes, not in sadness, but in acknowledgement. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't about him. It was about letting go of the weight I'd carried for too long. I whispered softly, "Goodbye, Richard." The wind carried it away. That night, I finished my final painting, a self-portrait. Not young, not idealized, just real. A woman standing before a cracked mirror, her reflection clear and whole. I titled it, "Freedom, My Love." When it dried, I signed it with my mother's name beside mine. Two women who had lived through silence and still chose color. Sometimes people ask me how it feels to start over at 63. I tell them the truth. It feels like remembering a song you thought you'd forgotten. It feels like breathing underwater and realizing the surface was always within reach. It feels like being alive, truly alive for the first time ever. As I closed the studio that night, I looked once more at the Paris skyline, the city lights flickering like tiny promises. And for the first time in my life, I didn't wonder what came next, because I was already there. The woman who vanished twice had finally returned to herself. And this time, she wasn't going anywhere.